Minister, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
Yep. Minister, let's start the conversation by just giving us an overview and a sense of what has been the year 2024 in the Zambian economy. It was a very difficult year. The country went through an El Nino-induced drought, which of course meant that the agricultural output wasn't where it typically always is, and that certain sectors of the economy felt a ripple effect of that. But some key reforms had also taken place there. The agreement for debt restructuring, trying to bring the debt down significantly, but also to reduce the debt to GDP ratio significantly by half. I think down from about 6% to down to about 3%. And these reforms are an important step towards economic consolidation, but also economic growth. Talk to us about what the last year has been like on the fiscal policy front.
Thank you very much once again. 2024 was indeed a tough year for us. Tough in the sense that in 2020, Zambia defaulted on our public debts with the international lenders. And with that, we were not able to attract much of capital in the country because who wants to invest into a country that is bankrupt? So from 2021, a lot of work was done. But I think 2024 was the time when most of the restructuring was done. As we sit right now, 90% of that unsustainable debt has been restructured. So that gave us the hope that we're at a stage where the economy was going to begin to climb. Then came the El Nino that you spoke about. Without El Nino, 50% of the agricultural output was lost. But also importantly, Zambia depends on hydropower for our energy. So with the drought, electricity generation went down also by about 50%. So the amount of electricity available for mining, manufacturing, and households became a challenge where we could only supply electricity, especially to the households, maybe 3 hours out of 24 hours a day. You talked about the reforms and the opportunity that came out of this difficult situation. On the food availability, the positive thing that has come is that the government was able to respond positively to protect human lives. And with that, all sorts of mechanisms were put in place, social transfers to the vulnerable people so that they can be able to buy food. That was broadened and enhanced. But also, for those of our population who are energetic and vibrant, who perhaps do not need handouts, we were able to establish what we call cash for work. In other words, we were able to provide cash in various municipalities across the countries so that the municipality themselves could identify public work that could be done by human beings, get paid, and be able to buy food for themselves. That covered almost 60% of their population, which was the population that was vulnerable. So we made a lot of progress there. Now, on the energy sector, this is where, as I indicated a few minutes ago, it was very, very tough. But again, the positive thing is that we did not just wave our arms in the air to cry. We said, what reforms, what changes do we institute so that there's resilience? I'll tell you some of those changes that were made. Firstly, we were able to agree with the population that there needed to be flexibility in terms of the tariffs because we're vulnerable due to dependence on hydropower. The answer to that vulnerability is that can we have other forms of energy that don't depend on water? What are these? Solar energy, thermal energy like coal, and stuff like that. But these other forms of energy, they cost more, they're more expensive than hydro. So if you are going to migrate to other sources of energy to avoid overdependence on hydro, people have to pay a higher price to attract investments into solar, thermal, and so forth. So we were able to achieve that. The second thing that we were able to achieve was indeed to attract significant amount of investments in both the thermal and solar, so that even if there's going to be another catastrophe, yes, of course, a catastrophe is always bad, but progressively we see ourselves reducing dependency on hydropower. The third thing that we're able to do out of this catastrophe is that there were times when there was a bit of surplus electricity around the region. And of course, we belong to the Southern African power pool. So sometimes there will be surplus in South Africa, and sometimes there will be surplus in Mozambique. We needed that electricity. But the old arrangements was that it had to take the state utility, the equivalent of ESCOM, we call it ZESCO there. It had to take the state utility to import that surplus electricity from elsewhere in the region. Now, supposing, as was the case this time, supposing the state utility does not have the cash on hand to be able to import that electricity, then you lose it.
Yeah.
So the reform was, can we move away from just depending on the state utility to be the trade of electricity? We've now done the reforms to license private sector people to be able to import electricity from wherever it is, bring it in Zambia. That means that the state utility financial position is no longer the binding constraint to be able to import electricity from outside the country. So these are some of the positive things that came out of this terrible drought. It was bad, but it also forced us to do certain changes.
Let's talk about those reforms in the energy sector are very important, and I want us to focus on it a little bit more. Diversifying your energy pool is important. I mean, having hydro as a singular source limits the country, as we've seen with the drought. But the introduction of renewable energy sources like solar and thermal, specifically through enabling independent power producers to be able to be playing in that value chain, is critically important. But has there been an appetite? Do you see financiers, investors, and power producers coming to the party and saying, hey, we are willing to do this? What are your terms? Are your terms favorable? Have you seen activity come since the announcement of these reforms?
Definitely, yes. We've seen increased appetite. As we speak, there's a new power station using coal. I think that would deliver 300 megawatts. The construction is on right now. It will become available in the year 2026 or early 2027. On top of that, we also have a number of solar installations that are being constructed right now. In all, I would think that if you add the quantum of all those solar installations, we are definitely more than 500 megawatts from the solar alone. And this happened within a very short period of time. I mean, within about 6-8 months, people talked, people agreed. So it is happening. I must say also that the role of the government machinery in facilitating these investments has been critical. As you know, to do an energy project, you need to do environmental impact studies. which in previous years could maybe take a year or two, and very expensive fees. As part of the reforms, we said from now onwards, the environmental permits must be done within 3 months. Okay? Not even 3, I think it's 2 months. Within 2 months, you people in charge of giving environmental permits, it must be done with your processes.
Are they in the room?
I can't tell. Then the issue of the license itself, we said within 48 hours, if all your paperwork is done, you must get your permits to move ahead. So yes, I think this has excited the people in the energy sector. The other week we were in Dar es Salaam at a summit organized by the World Bank. And this was an energy summit. How can we increase energy supply in Africa? The financiers were there. The project promoters were there. Zambia walked out of that with pledges of $3 billion investments into the energy sector. So I think we've made progress.
Let's talk about the way forward. Energy stabilization is part of that economic strategy. But so is revitalizing the agricultural sector, which was 50% down on its outputs last year, and the mining sector. Those are the three key sectors for economic growth. And the economic growth targets the government is looking at is in excess of 6%, up from about mid-2 to 3% at the moment. And the projected, I think the IMF is projecting something optimistic to the point of about 2.9%. Talk to me, Minister, about the role that mining very specifically will be playing in that economic growth strategy.
Both the IMF and ourselves and other independent people indeed were projecting 6.6% growth for 2025. Part of that will come about as a result of the recovery of the agricultural sector from the depressed levels of 2024 to at least the normal levels that we are accustomed to. But yes, so you talk about mining, the mining sector is also expected to play a significant role in that. In 2024, mining sector, in spite of that energy shortage that I spoke about, the mining sector grew by 12%. 12% in 2024, raising copper production in metric tons from just about 730 metric tons, 820,000 metric tons. For 2025, my colleague, the Minister of Mines, is pushing hard so that we move from 820,000 tons to 1 million tons of copper for 2025. And right now, there's a lot of expansion that is taking place that will help us to get to this 1 million tons. But I think the biggest benefits will begin to appear after 2026, 2027, because that's when many of the new projects that were being commissioned in 2024, that's when they will start to produce increased quantities of copper. And therefore, what I can say is that starting from 2025, in the next 3-4 years, we are pushing very hard towards that 3 million tons of copper. This obviously will see growth, not just in the copper sector itself, but with so much copper coming on stream, other sectors are going to benefit. Construction is going to benefit. Energy is going to benefit. Transport and logistics is going to benefit. People supply various types of services into the mines, they're going to benefit. This is why I think the discussion that we've had here is always on how we can encourage the mining sector to push benefits into the economy. beyond the taxes that they pay to the treasury, but also how do they support services, how do they support contractors. All that is going to assist to make the benefits to be broad-based. So we are very optimistic, and 2025 is the year when we begin to shoot up.
How do you get from 800 tons to 3 million in 2 to 3 years? Is it through increased licensing of prospecting, increased licensing of extraction, or is enough on the table at the moment? It's just about digging into the capacity that is already there.
The production for 2025 is expected to be, or we are pushing for 1 million tons, as I explained earlier on. The experts tell us that already the capacity, the mining output capacity, installed capacity, is 1.5 million tons, which means that to get to 1.5 million tons, or certainly if you are less ambitious to 1 million, as we have put it, it is more of how to dig faster and process that material, because the processing capacity is available. The 3 million tons, we are looking at the period beyond 2030. But to get there, there is, of course, you have to generate the interest now. And in fact, starting from 2021, we've been generating interest year in, year out as we came here. We spoke to investors, come and invest in Zambia. What is your problem? What are your constraints that you face? Let's talk about those. One of the issues that they laid on the table was that of instability in the fiscal regime, which was there in the 10 years before, where taxes every year they were being changed, confusing investors, raising risks. I'm happy to say that from 2021, we have not had the problem of fiscal instability. So I think that is beginning to create their confidence. But beyond that, there are also issues of how do we minimize conflict. Part of the problem that we went through was that there were too many legal cases, mostly involving the government and the mining operators. We are moving away from that. The Clarion core is that let's not mine in the courts, let's mine in the mines. If there are issues of disputes, let's sit across the table and resolve that. And I think we've done a lot of progress. This is how mining companies like First Quantum, which are threatened to leave, they've stayed on and expanding production. Barrick, also which are threatened to leave, they've stayed on, also expanding production. Mines like, I think the mine that was owned by Glencore before, Glencore left. We quickly found another mining investor, also ramping up production. So these issues of creating a stable environment, fiscal environment, the issues of being willing to talk across the table to resolve issues, plus, of course, the resource that is there, is creating that momentum to get to the 3 million tons. Lastly, I want to say that the government, you can only mine what is available, but what is available has to be discovered. So the government has hired a company which is doing aerial surveys. As we speak right now, they're busy doing the aerial surveys so that the so-called anomalies that the experts tell us can be identified. This will also generate interest among the investors. Let's not forget it. The market conditions are very positive for now for critical minerals like copper, nickel, and so forth. So all these are opportunities that have emerged that we have to take advantage of.
Yeah. You spoke, Minister, about the secondary effects of the growth of the mining sector, and that is there are certain sectors that benefit from that. Very specifically, let's talk about infrastructure development, because that's a necessary condition for the mining sector to grow. Specifically, as you rev up output volumes, it means that your supply chain in the country needs to be very, very strong. And of course, the rail network, the road network, all needs to be supported in a way that makes it easier to move goods and services around, specifically mining commodities. There is an infrastructure development financing plan that has previously been on the table. Talk to us about what the strategy is around infrastructure development going forward.
You're absolutely right. The central part of Africa is becoming most important for the critical minerals. And for that, you need functioning infrastructure, as you say, especially the rail network. The good news is that as a result of this drive to have more critical minerals, investors in the logistics are also positive. So right now, the discussions and the preparations for the railway line to link Lobito on the west coast of Africa with Angola and Zambia, that discussion is very advanced. We are very positive that it's to be concluded, and that perhaps 2026, as some of the experts have told us, we could see work getting started. So that is very positive. But it's not just the west coast where we are looking at connectivity. We are also looking for connectivity on the east coast. So again, as we speak, negotiations are very advanced between Zambia working together with Tanzania and China for the Tazara railway line to be rehabilitated. We are really toward the tail end of those negotiations. Hopefully, pretty soon this year, we'll sign off the concession. Both of these big, large pieces of infrastructure, they'll be financed through mostly through PPP, public-private partnerships. So I think we've made progress. Now, there's one leg that still remains. This is the leg from the old Zambia railways that links Zambia, in fact, links DRC through Zambia, through Zimbabwe, to the port of Durban. That railway line is not in good shape in Zambia. It's not good shape in Zimbabwe. We need to rehabilitate it. Yesterday, in one of the discussions, we said the opportunity is ripe now for the South African motor industry to go regional in terms of cooperation, in the sense that as we move towards electric vehicles, which will require batteries, of course, from lithium and stuff like that, which will require a lot of electrical motors, the time has come when these components can be manufactured within the region. Electrical motors in the Congo, DRC, and Zambia. Batteries can also be done in Zambia, possibly Zimbabwe, to feed into the South African motor industry. That way, if we did that, the South African motor industry, combined with other factors, will be more competitive. They can upscale to modern cars, drawing components from the region, and with that, I think this will be a very good type of regional cooperation, so that everybody in the region is something out of this pie to chew. For that to happen, the railway line from Congo DRC through Zambia, through Zimbabwe, needs to be rehabilitated so that it is state-of-the-art or functional. Because remember, in the car industry, people want to deliver or want to take delivery of the components when they need them.
Yeah.
You cannot do that if the railway line is dysfunctional. So this is a discussion that we need to push. It's good for everybody in the region.
Yeah. Let's talk about localization, especially for players coming from outside into Zambia that say, hey, look, I like the story. You're talking about 800 new megawatts being added to the grid, 500 being solar power, 300 of being coal-powered, looking at 6.6% projected economic growth for 2025 as a recovery here and potentially sustaining and stabilizing that in 2026. And the story of Zambia is being able to increase copper output from where it is projected at projected to 3 million tons by 2030, a million tons today. What is the story around localization fitting into that growth story? Because oftentimes when growth happens, communities, small and emerging players are often left behind on the periphery. And it takes concerted government policy to ensure that they benefit from the growth story and from the expansion of the value chain. Are there specific policies and policy thinking around the localization strategy?
Yeah, the localization strategy takes the whole spectrum from the smallest to the biggest. I've already discussed some of the biggest projects. The ability to evacuate the minerals through Lobito, through Dar es Salaam. That is obviously an aspect of localization because jobs will be created, small business opportunities will arise. Similarly, the extension or the rehabilitation of the railway line from Zambia to Durban, that is an aspect of localization. The other element is that of, I said, we need to tap into the South African motor industry. These are opportunities where motors can be manufactured within Africa, within Zambia, within Congo DRC, rather than us shipping raw copper, whether it's to China or Middle East or Europe. It needs to be done within Africa. And to our South African brothers, I would say, also don't push and say, okay, you want motors, we need motors, bring your copper. No, I think it is in the interest of South Africa also to say, yes, we need motors, but make them in Zambia, make them in Congo DRC. Why? Because it is in the interest of South Africa that jobs are created in those countries. If you want to draw everything into South Africa, the end result is that people in Congo, Zimbabwe, Zambia, they'll say, oh, where are the jobs in South Africa? Let's go. That will create problems here. So it is in the interest of everybody that we share these opportunities. Of course, at lower levels, we are pushing very hard so that out of this commodity boom, we have our transporters to take part in that, contractors to take part in that. This is a discussion that we are always having with the mining companies. The biggest insurance as a mining company is to please as many people as possible within the country. Because if they have the jobs, if they have the business opportunities, it will be hard for anyone to injure your industry because the benefits have. So this is a discussion that we keep on pushing. It's not easy. It's not moving as fast as we want it, but we keep on pushing and let the mining companies be aware that it is in their own interest that this happens.
Yeah. And just lastly, Minister, whenever we talk about the investment case of a country, we tend to use numbers to describe the investment case. We give the indices, like I said just now, 500 megawatts of new generation for power to the grid, 6.6% economic growth, debt stabilization, reducing the debt to GDP ratio by half of what it currently is in the next couple of years. Those things all sound attractive, and many of the investors will have their bankers comb through the fine details of that numbers to make sure that it makes sense for them. But sometimes an investment story is more than just the numbers. In the last 30 seconds that we have, what is the investment story beyond the numbers that you want investors and partners to think about?
The investment story is a simple one. We are ready to do business. People can come, talk to us. If there are issues, as normally is the case, we are ready as governments to talk about those and find mutual solutions. There is no alternative to encouraging the private sector growth if we have to solve the problem of economic growth and benefits in Africa. There's no alternative to that.
Yeah. Minister, thank you so much for your time.